Ambassador Keelthin floated in his water tank, watching the blue and white planet grow larger through the viewport. His gills fluttered with worry as his ship moved closer to Earth. 3 long months in hyperspace had brought him to this moment. The fate of countless worlds now rested on what these humans would decide. The war was going badly, very badly. The hegemony had already destroyed 12 peaceful worlds in the outer systems. Their black warships moved like death itself across the galaxy, leaving only ash and slavery behind them. The gentle Kalari people had been the first to fall. Their beautiful farms now grew food only for hegemony soldiers. The artistic Thornians came next. Their magnificent crystal cities lay in ruins, their people scattered or dead. The Galactic Confederation had tried everything. They sent their best diplomats to negotiate. The hegemony laughed and killed them. They gathered their largest fleets for battle. The hegemony crushed them with ease. Now, in their darkest hour, they were asking for help from a species that had barely left their own solar system. It seemed foolish, but Keelthin had seen the human military reports. These creatures from the Deathworld called Earth might be primitive, but they knew how to fight. Perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed right now. Captain Li Dongwu stood on the bridge of his destroyer, watching the strange alien ship approach. The vessel looked like it was made of living crystal, translucent and beautiful in a way that human technology could never match. Yet something about it seemed fragile, as if it had never been built for war. His communications officer, Lieutenant Park Hygiene, looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Captain, they're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The translation software is having trouble, but it looks like they're asking for permission to dock." Dongwu studied the alien craft carefully. No weapons that he could see, no aggressive movements. But after 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, he had learned to be cautious about everything. Grant them permission to dock at Luna Station, but keep our weapons ready just in case. He turned to his navigator. "Send a priority message to Admiral Kim on Earth. Tell her we have visitors, and they claim to represent something called the Galactic Confederation." 3 days passed before the meeting could be arranged. Keelthin spent that time in a specially built tank on Luna Station, trying to calm his nerves. He had studied human culture as much as possible during his journey, but these creatures were still a mystery to him. They came from a world so hostile that most Confederation species would die within minutes on its surface. What kind of beings could survive in such a place? Admiral Kim So-young entered the meeting room with quiet confidence. She was smaller than Keelthin had expected, barely reaching the height of his tank, even when he floated near the bottom. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her uniform bore the marks of someone who had earned her rank through years of service. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, dark and intelligent. They held a depth that reminded him of the great predators that hunted in his homeworld's deepest ocean trenches. "Ambassador Keelthin," she said through the translation device that had been set up between them, "you have traveled very far to reach us. I understand you represent the Galactic Confederation and that you need our help with something." Keelthin straightened in his tank, trying to project authority despite his nervousness. "Admiral Kim, I bring greetings from the Confederation Council. We face a crisis that threatens the very existence of peaceful civilization in this galaxy." He began to explain about the hegemony and their terrible war machine. He told her about the Kalari farmers who had been turned into slaves, forced to grow food for their conquerors. He described the Thornian artists whose beautiful works had been destroyed simply because the hegemony saw no value in beauty. He spoke of entire worlds turned into factory planets. Their populations worked to death building weapons for further conquest. As he spoke, Keelthin watched Admiral Kim's face carefully. He expected to see shock or horror at the descriptions of such brutality. Instead, her expression grew colder and more focused with each detail. Her hands remained steady on the table, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. This was not fear he was witnessing. This was something far more dangerous. "How many worlds have they taken?" she asked quietly. 12 confirmed, with 3 more under siege," Keelthin replied. "Our estimates suggest they will control the entire outer rim within 6 months if they are not stopped." Admiral Kim nodded slowly. "And what exactly are you asking from Earth?" "Whatever military support you can provide," Keelthin said. Ships, weapons, perhaps a few thousand soldiers to help reinforce our defensive lines. For a long moment, Admiral Kim said nothing. She simply stared at him with those dark, calculating eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but carried an edge that made Keelfin's gills flutter with sudden unease. Ambassador, you have just made a very dangerous mistake. You have asked humanity to care about your people. And when humans care about something, we protect it, no matter what the cost. In that moment, Keelfin realized that the Confederation had not asked for help. They had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before. Dr. Yoon Jae-ho adjusted his tie nervously as he stood before the massive holographic display in his laboratory on Earth. In a few moments, he would be speaking to representatives from across the galaxy, explaining what humans were really like. He had spent his entire career studying alien biology, but now the tables were turned. Today, he was the one being studied. The hologram flickered to life, showing him the emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council. Dozens of different alien species filled the circular chamber, each one looking more worried than the last. Some floated in tanks like Ambassador Keelfin. Others wore special suits to protect them from the chamber's atmosphere. A few were so different from anything on Earth that Jae-ho could barely understand what he was looking at. Council members, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. I have been asked to explain the biological nature of humanity and our homeworld. I must warn you that some of this information may be disturbing. He clicked a button, and the first image appeared on the chamber's main screen. It showed Earth from space, blue and white and beautiful. Several alien representatives made sounds of surprise or fear when they saw it. The human homeworld maintains an atmosphere that is 21% oxygen. Jae-ho explained, this gas is highly reactive and will be poisonous to most of your species. In fact, our research shows that 73% of known intelligent races would die within minutes of breathing our air. Council member Veltana of the plant-like Gryash people shifted uncomfortably in her protective biosuit. When the humans had first sent their environmental data, she had thought there must be some mistake. No thinking species could possibly evolve on such a deadly world. The planet's surface, Jae-ho continued, is mostly covered by liquid water. This substance makes up 60% of the human body. It is what we call a universal solvent, meaning it can dissolve almost anything given enough time. The alien representatives began whispering among themselves. Liquid water was known throughout the galaxy, but most species could only survive brief contact with it. The idea of beings made mostly from this dangerous substance was terrifying. Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. Jae-ho said, this is approximately twice what most of you would consider normal. Humans have adapted to live under this constant pressure from birth. The chamber fell silent as the full horror of what they were hearing sank in. These humans came from a world that would kill most galactic species in minutes, and they considered it home. Meanwhile, on Earth, Colonel Choi Min-ho sat in his office, reviewing the deployment orders that had just arrived from military command. As the leader of Earth's first expeditionary force, he was responsible for preparing humanity's first military mission beyond their solar system. The weight of that responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders. Major Lim Eugene knocked on his door and entered with a tablet full of intelligence reports. She was one of Min-ho's best officers, sharp and dedicated to her work. Sir, she said, setting the tablet on his desk, we have completed our analysis of hegemony military tactics. They seem to depend heavily on fear and psychological warfare to defeat their enemies. Min-ho picked up the tablet and scrolled through the information. The hegemony strategy was simple but effective. They would arrive at a peaceful world with overwhelming force, demonstrate their power by destroying something important, and then demand surrender. Most species, faced with such brutality, would give up rather than see their people suffer. They have never fought against a species that fights back effectively, Eugene continued. Every world they have conquered gave up after the first show of force. Min-ho looked up from the tablet with a grim smile. Then they are about to learn something new. How is the recruitment going? Eugene's expression grew serious. Every military branch is reporting volunteer numbers at 300% of normal capacity, sir. When the news about the civilian casualties reached Earth, she trailed off, but Minho understood. "I know," he said quietly. Images of the hegemony's concentration camps had been broadcast across Earth's networks. The sight of peaceful alien families being herded like animals had stirred something deep in the human spirit, something that had not been awakened since the darkest days of their own world's history. "Prepare the troops for immediate deployment," Minho ordered, "and make sure they understand something important. We are not just fighting for Earth anymore. We are fighting for every peaceful species in the galaxy." Back at the council chambers, Ambassador Keelfin watched the data about humanity scroll across the displays around him. The other ambassadors were starting to understand what they had done. They had not asked for military help from a normal civilized species. They had awakened something from the deepest nightmare of evolution itself. A species that had been forged by a world so hostile that survival itself required constant warfare. Beings who had learned to thrive in conditions that would kill most other forms of life. But perhaps most terrifying of all, these Deathworld predators had somehow learned to care about others. They had developed empathy and compassion despite coming from a planet where only the strongest could survive. The galaxy was about to meet humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The space around Kepler, 442b, had been quiet for months. The hegemony occupation fleet floated in perfect formation around the planet, their black ships blocking out the stars. Inside those ships, the crews felt safe and powerful. They had conquered this world just like all the others. The peaceful aliens below had surrendered quickly, and now they served as slaves and food for the mighty hegemony. Then the humans arrived. Admiral Kim So-young stood on the bridge of her flagship, the U.S. Indomitable, watching the tactical display with growing anger. The hegemony ships were positioned around the planet, like vultures around a dying animal. But what made her blood run cold were the energy readings coming from the surface. Captain C.O. Taemin's voice crackled over the communication system from his destroyer, the U.S. Retribution. "Admiral, we are detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. They appear to be conducting orbital bombardment of civilian areas." Kim So-young gripped the metal rail, so hard her knuckles turned white. Through the large windows of her ship, she could see flashes of light on the dark side of the planet. Each flash meant death for innocent people below. The hegemony was not just occupying this world. They were killing anyone who might resist. "All ships," she announced, her voice carrying to every human vessel in the fleet. "You are witnessing genocide in progress. Our mission has changed. We are no longer here just to rescue. We are here for justice." The human fleet moved forward like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. Down on the surface of Kepler, 442b, Sergeant Park Ji-hoon led his squad of Marines through what had once been a beautiful farming village. The Kalari people who lived here looked like deer that walked on two legs. They were gentle creatures who had never hurt anyone. Their farms had fed family for generations. Now the village was nothing but smoking ruins and empty buildings. Corporal Jang Eun-woo, the youngest member of Ji-hoon's squad, stopped suddenly beside a large hole in the ground. His face went pale as he looked down into it. "Sergeant," he whispered, "you need to see this." Ji-hoon walked over and looked down into the mass grave. Dozens of small bodies lay tangled together at the bottom. Kalari children who would never grow up, never play in the field again, never see their parents smile. The hegemony had killed them all simply to send a message to anyone who might think about fighting back. Something cold and hard settled in Ji-hoon's chest. It was the same feeling his grandfather had described from the old wars on Earth, when humans had fought against others who committed such evil acts. "The kind that will not be monsters much longer," he said quietly to his squad. When the first hegemony patrol found Ji-hoon's Marines, they expected an easy victory. Every other species they had encountered would surrender quickly when faced with superior numbers. Some would run away. Others would try to negotiate. None had ever truly fought back with everything they had. The humans were different. They did not just fight to win the battle. They fought to make sure that the hegemony could never hurt innocent people again. They moved through the enemy positions like a force of nature, destroying not just soldiers but every weapon, every communication device, every piece of equipment that could be used to cause suffering. The hegemony soldiers had never seen anything like it. These humans fought with a controlled fury that was more frightening than any weapon. They showed no mercy to those who had harmed civilians, but they were careful to protect any prisoners or innocent people they found. Overlord Kresh, the hegemony commander in charge of the occupation, watched his tactical displays with growing confusion and fear. His forces were not just losing. They were being completely destroyed by an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. His aide, a nervous creature with scales and too many eyes, approached his command chair carefully. "Sir, the humans are broadcasting on all communication channels. They are demanding that we withdraw from all occupied territories immediately." Kresh showed his sharp teeth in what his species considered a threatening expression. One primitive species thinks it can challenge the entire hegemony? How many casualties have we inflicted on them? The aide looked even more nervous. "That is the problem, sir. Our forces are suffering catastrophic losses, while the humans have taken very few casualties. Our psychological warfare specialists report that our own troops are becoming more afraid of the humans than the humans are of us." Kresh felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. For the first time in his life, he was truly afraid. These humans were not like any enemy the hegemony had ever faced. They were not trying to conquer territory or gain resources. They were fighting for something far more dangerous than greed or power. They were fighting because they cared about people they had never met. As the reports continued to pour in from across the planet, Kresh began to understand a terrible truth. The hegemony had not attacked a weak alliance of peaceful species. They had awakened something that should have been left alone. They had made humanity angry. Colonel Choi Minho walked slowly through the streets of Velthara, a Kalari farming town that had been liberated 3 weeks ago. The buildings were still damaged from the hegemony occupation, but signs of life were returning. Kalari families had come out of hiding and were beginning to rebuild their homes. The sweet smell of their traditional cooking filled the air, mixing with the scent of medicine from a human field hospital. What struck Minho most was how the children behaved around his soldiers. At first, the young Kalari had hidden behind their parents whenever they saw humans. The deer-like aliens had been told that humans were dangerous monsters from a death world. But children learned quickly, and now they played games around the legs of human Marines who shared their food and helped rebuild damaged houses. Private Kim Soo-bin sat on a broken wall, carefully bandaging the injured leg of a small Kalari child. The little one had stepped on a piece of sharp metal left behind by the hegemony. Soo-bin spoke softly to the child in broken Kalari, making silly faces to distract him from the pain. Other children gathered around to watch, no longer afraid. Lieutenant Colonel Bae Soo-jin approached Minho with a tablet full of new intelligence reports. She was his second-in-command and one of the most capable officers he had ever worked with. Her expression was serious as she handed him the device. "Colonel," she said quietly, "we have received new information about the hegemony's command structure. They are pulling their remaining forces back to their home system. It looks like they are preparing for a final battle." Minho scrolled through the report, studying the tactical information. After 3 months of fighting, the hegemony was finally starting to understand what they were facing. Human forces had liberated 17 worlds and destroyed most of their military infrastructure. The enemy was running out of places to hide. "What about our casualties?" he asked. "Very light on our side, sir," Soo-jin replied. "But there's another issue. The Confederation Council has sent a formal complaint about our treatment of hegemony prisoners. They say our interrogation methods are too aggressive." Minho looked up from the tablet, his expression hardening. "Too aggressive? Have they visited the forced labor camps we found? Have they seen the breeding facilities where the hegemony turned intelligent beings into farm animals?" Captain Lee Hyun-woo, who had just arrived from Earth with fresh supplies and reinforcements, joined their conversation. He had been briefed about the situation during his journey, but seeing the reality of the hegemony's crimes had shaken him. "Sir," Hyun-woo said carefully, "I understand your anger. We all do. But some of our methods are making even our allies nervous. The Confederation expected us to fight more like them, more diplomatically." Minho walked over to a memorial wall that had been built in the town square. On it were inscribed the names of all the Kalari who had died during the occupation. Hundreds of names covered the smooth stone surface. Men, women, children, elderly, all killed for the crime of existing on a world the hegemony wanted. "Captain," Minho said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 3 months of war, "there's nothing diplomatic about genocide. The hegemony made their choice when they decided to prey on peaceful species. Now they have to live with the consequences of that choice." He turned back to face his officers. "We are not here to make friends with war criminals. We are here to make sure this never happens again." Far across the galaxy, in the elegant halls of the Confederation Council, Ambassador Keelthin found himself in an increasingly difficult position. The other council members were growing more worried about humanity with each passing day. The humans had exceeded every expectation, but their methods of warfare were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Council member Veltana of the plant-like Gryash people leaned over to whisper to Keelthin during a break in the session. Her bio-suit rustled as she moved. "They fight like demons when facing the enemy," she said nervously, "but they treat our people like their own children. What kind of species have we brought into our galaxy?" Keelthin looked at the tactical reports streaming across the displays around the council chamber. Human forces were not just winning battles. They were completely destroying the hegemony's ability to make war, while at the same time building refugee camps, hospitals, and repair facilities for the liberated worlds. Every human military unit included medical teams, engineers, and humanitarian specialists. They fought with terrible efficiency against their enemies, but showed incredible compassion to civilians and refugees. It was a combination that confused and frightened many council members. "Perhaps," Keelthin said thoughtfully, "we have found exactly what the galaxy needed. Not conquerors who would replace the hegemony, not liberators who would leave us to rebuild alone, but guardians who will make sure the strong cannot prey on the weak." The other council members fell silent, considering his words. Outside the great windows of the council chamber, ships from dozens of worlds moved through space under protection of human warships. For the first time in years, the trade routes were safe. The galaxy was learning what it meant to have humanity as protectors. The black towers of Kreltar had stood for over 2,000 years, reaching into the sky like the claws of some ancient beast. From these dark spires, the hegemony had ruled half the galaxy with fear and cruelty. No enemy had ever set foot in the sacred throne room at the top of the highest tower. Until today. Admiral Kim So-young walked slowly across the polished floor, her boots echoing in the vast chamber. The walls were covered with trophies from conquered worlds, artwork stolen from the Thornians, sacred crystals taken from the Kalari, bones from species that no longer existed. Each item told a story of suffering and loss. The surviving members of the Hegemony Supreme Council knelt before her in chains. Their proud uniforms were torn and dirty. Their weapons had been taken away months ago. The mighty empire that had once terrorized the galaxy was now just a group of broken old creatures begging for mercy. "Your war crimes tribunal will begin within 1 month," Kim So-young told them through a translation device. Her voice was calm but firm. "Those found guilty of genocide will be sent to a prison world for the rest of their lives. Your military will be completely destroyed. Your species will be watched by the Confederation for the next 100 years. Former Supreme Commander Vexthal, who had once commanded fleets that destroyed entire civilizations, looked up at the human admiral. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect. "You could have killed us all," he said quietly. "Your people have the power to wipe out our entire species. Why did you not do it?" Kim So-young thought about the question for a long moment. She remembered the mass graves on Kepler, for 42B, the concentration camps, the children who would never see their parents again. It would have been easy to let her anger take control. "Because that would make us just like you," she said finally. "We fight to protect people, not to destroy them." 6 months later, Colonel Choi Min-ho stood on the observation deck of humanity's first protection station. The massive orbital facility floated at the crossing point of 3 major trade routes, its weapons and sensors watching over the busy traffic below. Ships from dozens of different worlds passed by every hour, their crews knowing they were safe under human protection. Captain CO Tim Min joined him at the large window. He had been promoted to run the station's daily operations, a job that required him to coordinate with alien species he had never even heard of a year ago. "This is not what I expected when I joined the military," Tae Min said with a small smile. "I thought I would spend my career defending Earth from aliens. Now I am defending aliens from each other." Minho watched a group of Kalari cargo ships dock at the station's loading bays. Their deer-like crews moved carefully but without fear, knowing that human marines stood ready to protect them from pirates or raiders. "Maybe this is what Earth is preparing us for all along," Minho said thoughtfully. "Maybe all those years of fighting each other taught us how to fight for others." On Luna, Dr. Yoon Jae-ho stood before a holographic display showing the annual meeting of the Galactic Confederation Council. The same alien representatives who had once been terrified of humanity's biological profile now looked to humans for guidance and protection. "The galaxy has learned an important lesson," he told the assembled delegates. "Sometimes the most dangerous predator makes the best guardian. Humanity will stand watch so that peaceful species can remain peaceful." The council members listened carefully to his words. They had seen what humans could do when they were angry. They had also seen what humans could do when they cared about something. Both were equally impressive and terrifying. Ambassador Keelthin floated in his water tank aboard the UES Guardian, the newest ship in humanity's protection fleet. Around him, human and alien crew members worked together, sharing knowledge and friendship that would have been impossible before the war. A young human engineer was teaching a Gryash botanist how to repair the ship's life support systems. A Kalari communications officer was helping human pilots learn the trade languages used in the outer systems. Through the large windows of the ship, Keelthin could see the stars streaming past as they traveled to their next patrol area. The galaxy was still healing from the damage caused by the hegemony, but it was healing under the watchful eyes of its new guardians. He thought back to that desperate day when he had first approached Earth, asking for help from a species that had barely left their own solar system. The Confederation had hoped for a few thousand soldiers and some basic weapons. Instead, they had found something far more valuable. They had found a species that understood both war and peace. Humans could fight with terrible efficiency when they needed to, but they preferred to build and protect rather than destroy. They had become the galaxy's guardians not because they wanted power, but because they could not stand to see innocent people suffer. The universe had sent the Confederation exactly what they needed in their darkest hour. Not saviors who would solve all their problems for them. Not conquerors who would replace one oppressor with another, but guardians who understood that sometimes, to keep the peace, you had to be ready for war. The galaxy would never be the same, and that Keelthin knew was exactly how it should be.